Got that. Okay, it's 5:40 and we might as well go ahead and get started, and we may have more people join us, which is great. Um, but we will have an opportunity, hopefully at the end, for questions and things like that. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do have something that comes up. As I said, I'm Andrea Shively, and Sharon Rao is my co-presenter, and both of us worked together. We were sixth grade teachers teaching math and social studies in the same classroom, and then somehow we got roped into giants, and so our life has not been the same since. But that's been going on for several years. But again, we have. We have shared the Giants program several different times in sessions and that. And tonight is not so much a focus on Giants as it is on how we use it and how we've connected with our students through the use of literature and also creating their own notebooks, either a paper version or a digital version, kind of like their own storybook. So we're going to just go through that information. We are going to touch briefly on Giants, and then we'll move on to some of the novels, the literature that we've included in Giants, and how we use it, and how it's become a very enriching component to our classroom. So let's see. Again, storytelling techniques. This does it when we're reading these books to our students, even the picture books or the novels. They love it when you read a story to them, and it activates their thinking. Students learning about not only geography but also world history, civics, and economics. And there's a lot of influx of culture, and students make these connections. They create their own storybook notebook of knowledge to demonstrate their understanding of the standards and the skills. And so again, that's one that we find that's really important and useful for our students. This is what we're going to be going through. So we've done our welcome, or I'm sorry, I guess I haven't welcomed you. Welcome. We appreciate you spending the time and joining us. And if you are watching this as it's recorded or after it's been recorded, I hope you can get through it, and and you can get something out of it as well. We'll take a look at Giants for a few minutes, and then we'll go right into it. So the bulk of it will be about literature in the social studies classroom. We'll emphasize student engagement, our notebook, storybook notebook, the two different versions, give you some tips, things like that. And then we'll try to save some time at the end, maybe 10, 15 minutes, see if anyone has questions, comments, or suggestions. Oops. So for those of you not familiar with Giants, it is an online program that we've been working with Phil and Carol Gershmal for, I don't know, last 6 years, 5, 6 years, whatever it's been. And so we've worked specifically on the sixth grade Giants with them. We have 5 units of study. In Michigan here, we've got our focus is on geography, world geography, which kind of takes in quite a bit, obviously. And so we've got these 5 thematic units. And then within these units, we use regions of the world to help focus on these particular themes. So when we're working in Unit 1, for instance, not only are we looking at the world as a whole, but then we start to break it down into regions like Africa and South America to help emphasize a particular concept or big idea that we're working on. So Unit 1, obviously physical geography. We want to get the students comfortable with just things like map skills. We want to develop their understanding of connections and conditions. And so again, looking at it in a couple of different ways, we take what we call a global perspective. So we look at the entire world, and then we start to zoom in on some of the different regions, and also some even zoomed in further into some local areas as well. So that's what we spend a lot of time with in Unit 1. Besides the physical geography and the map skills that we use, we're also working with things like history. We spend time looking at where the ancient cities developed and what were the geographic conditions that the people of these ancient civilizations found that they could, survive and thrive in. And so again, we go through the different units. Unit 2, population. Again, we look at the entire world, and then we start to break it down. We use China as a case study on population. And in this particular unit, we also use a lot of math skills. So map skills in Unit 1, math skills in Unit 2, with looking at graphs, looking at data, and giving the students an understanding of how countries learn to deal with what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a growing population or a declining population. Not only the effects on the country politically, socially, economically, but also the environment physically. So that's another great unit. Unit 3, that one is the one I'm in teaching right now with my students. And this is human environment interaction. This is where we include not only the world, but then we take a closer look at North America and Russia. And again, our focus is on how do we modify, how do humans modify the environment, or how do humans adapt to the environment? So what are the things that we change, and what are the things that we change us, that force us to change? So we take a closer look at a lot of different aspects with that, the biosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and atmosphere. And we go through and again, take a look at data as well as our maps. Unit 4 is culture. We take a look at cultural characteristics, again, through the lens of the world. And then we focus in on Europe, Southwest Asia, South Asia, such as India. And when we look at it, we are working with cultural characteristics, cultural adaptation, and then we end with cultural diffusion. We take a look at, again, through time, through history, we can see that the European powers, that colonial powers that were able to, during the age of exploration, go out to other parts of the world and colonize, and they also brought with them their culture and what are the lasting impacts, both positive and negative, that occurred from that. The last unit that we have is Unit 5, which is movement. And so again, this kind of comes on the heels of diffusion, which used to be in Unit 5. We moved it to Unit 4. And again, we look at the world. We also take a closer look at the United States and Southwest Asia. Within movement, there are 2 areas of focus. There is trade, which we take a closer look at why do people and or countries trade, and what all is involved in that, from raw materials in one location to manufacturing in another, to distribution and markets in another location. And then the last is about people, movement of people. So immigration, what is it, those push-pull factors that either encourage or force people to move or change, and what is the history behind that, and what is the impact in where they are moving to or immigrating to, and where they've immigrated from. So that pretty much covers it. Like I said, we end up looking at the entire world, but we do it through this thematic approach. And down at the bottom here, we have our link to Giants, the Giants website. And that takes you It's at the this website, ss.oaisd.org. And you may have seen this before in previous sessions. And there's a list of different grade levels in that. And when you click on it, there's our 5 thematic units. Okay, so going back to this. So now let's take a look at the literature aspect of it.
Well, good evening. My name is Sharon Rao, and I taught with Andrea in the same school district. And then, as she had said, we have both worked on the Giants curriculum. So as we started doing our writing process for Giants, we kept falling back on literature that we either knew or were reading about that fit into each of our units extremely well. And not only did the writing fit into the unit, most of it was written around a 10, 11, or 12-year-old, which just really kind of cemented that we wanted to start putting more and more literature into our program. We knew the basics that are listed on the screen, that literature increases engagement, develops connections to the characters. The activating higher level thinking was one of our largest focuses at the time. But like everyone else, we started thinking about, if we start adding literature, how much does this add to our cost in the classroom? And we know that's a huge element for teachers. So as teachers ourselves that were trying to develop the program, we started thinking about what would it be like to try and accrue all of these books for these 5 units. We started thinking about our media specialist immediately. She's a great resource. I'm sure your media specialist is also, and they have a lot of these books in their library, or you may see on the screen that a lot of them are more of picture books, so they can get them from an elementary library. You can also borrow them from your local library. But we also started looking at the cost. And so we did a little bit of research, and we finally came up with, the fact that we could probably talk to our PTO, a community foundation. We could use school money that we have for our classroom, although we know not everyone has that. But at our school, and because we were both involved in this, we chose to talk to our curriculum director. Our school district was starting to lean towards this curriculum. And so we started talking about the fact that if we weren't purchasing textbooks for our students, could we afford to buy the books for each of the teachers? Our district had many social studies teachers at the time. And we were fortunate that all of these books together cost less than a teacher's edition of a hard copy textbook. And so we were extremely lucky. One of the books is hard to find. And so we ended up just getting enough copies that they're in the library and people can check them out as needed. So once we determined that the cost was not a major impact, then we started really looking at, is all this literature worth it? And the more we looked at it, the more we knew it was. As we started teaching with the first book, which is Home of the Brave, we found out that students really connected. They were extremely interested in what was going on. And we just had our own copy. We didn't have a classroom set where they were reading along. This is one thing we do not have recorded in the program of Giants, and that's due to copyright issues. Our suggestion is that you actually take the time to record the books, and that way the students can also listen to the book in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and once you record it once, you're done. When you look at all of the books on the screen, you'll notice there's a lot of trade books. And, some people are kind of taken back that there's so many trade books. How do you get through them? we're actually able to get through the majority of them, but the ones we're not, we choose which areas in the book to read to the students, which ones to form the discussions from, or quotes to pull from them. To help teachers who aren't familiar with all the books, in the Giants program, we've included questions, and there are questions for every chapter of every book. We don't expect you to use every single one, but it helps prompt you and takes that, what am I going to have for tomorrow off your shoulders, but you can put it into your lesson plan. We know all of this is extremely important. Using evidence in their curriculum writing was extremely important to us. And so in their talk and also in their writings, when they're using their notebook, we really encourage them to use supporting evidence and to use problem solving to come up with their answers. We try to get them into the higher level thinking skills, so they're not just at a DOK 1 all the time. We're pushing them into DOK 2 and to DOK 3. It's really easy to fall into that 1 and 2 category, but we really want to push our students that little bit further if we're able to. Andrea, can you advance it, please? So when we look at the books, we actually have kind of shown you a breakdown of how they're used. In the upper left corner is Unit 1. So you are using basically 4 picture books. And the first book you use is Zoom, and that's your first day of class. And it's an activity where you can get, well, once our pandemic is over, you can get the kids up and moving. The kids enjoy it. And the nice part for you is they have to be totally silent while they're doing it. And all of the directions for it is in the Giants program. We have a couple trade books that you read. Home of the Brave is a quick read. And Secret of the Andes takes a little bit longer, but the students get involved in it. Both of them are dealing with students around that 12-year-old age. The quote we pulled from Home of the Brave was, "She has many wrinkles to show her great knowledge of the world." And we talk about that with the students. Do they talk about their grandparents or neighbor who is older by saying they have wrinkles, so I know they have knowledge? And typically our country does not look at people that way. And so we're always trying to pull those quotes out of the book to have students realize that these are sayings and cultural differences around the world. So when we move into Unit 2, we are dealing with Choo's house, and that is the only book you're reading in Unit 2. The students are fascinated. Choo is about their age. She is the oldest of 2 and realizes because the new child that's born is a girl, her parents have a problem because they need a son. And the quote, "Give us a son to bring honor to our family," brings up a huge discussion, especially with your girls. The boys are interested, but the girls become a little bit, we'll say, cantankerous in the classroom because they've not dealt with that a whole lot, and they don't understand why a son is more important. You'll see that there's 2 books in Unit 1 and Unit 2. And if you look down, they're still in Unit 3. And those are If the World Were a Village and This Child, Every Child. Those books are books we use throughout our curriculum. They're short synopsises that you read about what the people look like in the village, what they're comprised of data-wise, but also what's happening to each of these children. So in This Child, Every Child, they'll talk about how a child feels fortunate to be able to attend school. And if you ask our children, are you fortunate to be able to attend school? some of them are not going to say, oh yeah, this is the best place to be. So, you know, once again, we start talking about why would someone think that it's a privilege to go to school and not have that choice. When we move on to Unit 4, we have 2 long trade books. They also go, I'm sorry, Unit 3, they also go into Unit 4. Pioneer Girl is Unit 3. Again, with If I Were a Village and This Child, Every Child. Some of these books you may have in your classroom. That's our hope, is that some of you have them in your classroom and that it's not a total new purchase. You'll see in Unit 5, there is, and that's the lower right-hand corner, there are a lot of books in Unit 5. And you're only talking a 4 to 5 week unit. And people are very much taken aback at the number of books. But you have to remember the 2 books in the upper left-hand corner are books you started before, you've been carrying them over. And then also a lot of them on the right from Oxcart Man down are more of a picture book. They're quick reads. You can get a discussion rolling very quickly. They're talking about culture, a lot of cultural changes. And like in Hiromi's Hands, the father learns how to be a sushi chef because that's a man's job. But he moves to the United States and he likes a lot of what he sees in the United States. And then his daughter becomes very interested. And so he trains her. And so here we are in the US, and now she becomes one of the first sushi chefs. And this is based on a true story. So we're not just picking just any books, we're really trying to connect them to what we are teaching. A lot of people are familiar with A Long Walk to Water. That's actually a very quick read. The students really get involved in it. Our suggestion is we have them answer questions either for the young girl or the young boy. And so they follow their tracks a little bit more closely than the other, but they're hearing the whole story. And it's a really nice way it comes together at the end. The quote, I learned Hindi from her and she learned English from me, is from the book All My Dreams. I can't remember which title it is.
Small Acts of Courage.
No, it's not Small Acts of Courage. I think it's All My Dreams. I think it's
Oh yeah, All My Noble Dreams.
And it's a family living in India, and the girl is learning Hindi from a little girl in her nursery, and then the little girl is learning English, but she is not allowed to speak Hindi in front of her father, and her father is a British officer and doesn't feel India should have their independence. And so we talk about why would this be a huge concern if he's a British officer? I mean, she's learning a second language. And that brings up a whole nother big discussion. These books springboard more discussions than you'll possibly imagine. The further we got into the program, the more we knew we needed to include literature to enrich the program, to enrich the learning experience for our students. And it also gave that extra element to a social studies program that often a lot of kids don't connect anything to.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Now we're going to take a look at their notebook. And so this is where they would be recording information, adding information to their notebook as they work through the social studies curriculum. And again, it's kind of like their own storybook of world geography and what they've learned from it. So we have two different formats that we want to talk to you about. On the left is the digital notebook. This year, I've been teaching remotely the entire school year. And so obviously I had to make some changes and adjustments. In previous years, my students made a typical paper notebook, the spiral bound notebook, and added information to it and that. And so I had to rethink it for this year. And what I found was that just like they can create their own like Google slideshows and that, I thought, well, we can use that same format. My school district uses the Google Classroom, the Google Education Suite. And so that's what our students are used to. I know that there are some other platforms to use. And so you can think about how you can maybe work that into your particular platform, but I'm just going to go with what I've been using and what's been working for my students in that. So I'll take a look at the digital notebook first. So just a few things. The device, obviously you need a device, a computer, it could be an iPad or whatever, Chromebook. Our students are in a one-to-one district, so they do have Chromebooks, and they do get to take them home at night and things like that. So even though I mentioned I'm teaching remotely exclusively, I had planned on using a digital notebook in the classroom as a way for them to kind of build up those tech skills and that. So it just kind of was like, I had to do it now. And so even if you are not a one-to-one district, then hopefully if you have access to like a computer lab once or twice a week, things like that, you could still potentially have your students work on this and be able to create their digital notebook. Again, this is going to be kind of, it's similar to guided notes in that we give students the information and they may have to add some annotations to it. They may have to add some text boxes with their responses in that, but they don't spend a lot of time copying it down word for word from a screen or a textbook or a chalkboard or something. So it's already enhanced for them, and that really works out well. Not just with our with all of our general ed students, but also it's a time saver for special ed students as well. Obviously, they work on their tech skills, and they've become very very savvy with that. This is a resource for them, and it's just now provided in a new format, a digital format, rather than a paper copy. One thing to suggest is to provide how-to videos for things like editing pages or adding pages to their notebook. And so I do that, make up little videos, screencastify, and put them in Google Classroom so students can go back if they're having some difficulty, again, working remotely, being able to connect their text or their notebook slides. So let's take a look at an example. And all I did was I pulled together different pages from different students' notebooks that they've turned into me digitally. And so I'm going to leave it in this format so that you can kind of see some of the slides on the left as well as what's being presented in that. So I give them a cover. They have a table of contents. These are hyperlinked. So if you are using one notebook, you will be able to, like I'm in unit 3 right now. So I don't want to scroll through all of unit 1 and 2 to get to that information in unit 3, nor do I want the students wasting time on that. So immediately they can hit that and it will take them to unit 3. And then they are, another option is you can also have them do it in individual units and keep those as separate slide presentations as just unit 1, unit 2, and unit 3, and so forth. So you want a table of contents for the specific unit that you're working in. And so this is one that, again, we just went through and built. Just like a regular paper notebook, we would start on the left side and work our way down. These are all links. and they would take us to one of the pages in the notebook. So for instance, if I want to go to an example of the compass rose, or what a student did, there is their compass rose that they created. So in this particular slide, and again, all of these slides come from Giants, our Giants sixth grade curriculum. And so this particular page, it was just a series of these different pieces. And then they would have to click and drag them onto a separate slide and build their compass rose. Last year when I was making a paper notebook, I printed these off with all the pieces and everything and the directions, and they had to cut them out and glue it all together and put it in their notebook. So here they're just manipulating it digitally. And then as you go through it, here's another great example. This is because I really struggled with, okay, how am I going to get them to put all this information on a map? And so at least with the Google Slides, they can edit them. And so this particular student, she did a great job. They had a list. This was a pre-test. And again, this was in unit 1, physical geography. So when she got this map, it was a blank map. And it just had the outlines of the continents on there. And she had the list of items that she had to include. And then that's what she was able to put into her notebook. And then also later, the next week, I gave them a copy of like the answer key. So they would have that to reference and look at and see how well they did with it. But adding all of the text boxes to include the names of the continents and oceans. And they also included the lines of latitude in particular here. And she's got a compass rose down there. So again, as you can see, just some different slides. Here's a student that added some slides, or excuse me, they added some text boxes onto these work maps of Africa. And again, when we have these slides posted in Giants, then if you're a teacher in the classroom and you're making a paper copy, you are just going to download this and print it off and hand it out to your kids. And again, when you do that, then they can't change or eliminate these captions, or they can't remove one of these maps. We have 3 of these 3 outline maps of Africa. So they can't change anything with it when it's a paper copy. Well, we wanted to make sure that these maps or these slides, the maps especially, stayed intact, and that kids wouldn't change them, or they could only add information to them, not take any information away. So we figured out how to turn this into the background of a slide. And so then all they have to do is just add information to it. We don't have to worry about them deleting, map B or something. So you can see that they went through this. And this is information that they looked at a PowerPoint presentation about latitude and the effect of it on the continent of Africa. So there's a lot of different examples in that. We have compelling questions, a compelling question for each unit, and supporting questions. Here's a supporting question. This student added some information. These are text boxes. So here they couldn't change the question because I set it as the background, but they could add a text box and add information that went along with it. So again, those are just some examples of what we have in the digital notebook. I'm going to see if I can get back to, yep. So then if we take a look at the paper notebook and I've got a sample of that because I just took some pictures and uploaded it into a slide presentation. But obviously you need supplies like glue and a notebook and pencils, colored pencils, that kind of thing. It's the same exact pages. So those are those guided notes where there is enough information there that supports their thinking that they can then add more information to. Again, we know that by doing that with paper and pencil, it's a hands-on project. When my students have done it in the past, they enjoy it, they take pride in it. And that means that in most cases, they don't lose it. They hang on to that notebook all year long. It gets a little rough looking by the end of the year, but they do hang on to it. And then one of the other things that we do is that if you are having your students create a paper copy, make sure that you are making a paper copy with them. So you model it each time you're having them add a notebook page into their notebook, that and then adding information to it. So, you know, if you have a document camera or whatever that you can show to students for a couple of different reasons. Not only are you modeling it, but then if there's a student that is absent, and they come in, you know, they're out a couple of days and they come back and they're like, what did I miss? That kind of thing. You know, I would just tell them, oh, well, we've added, you know, 2 more pages to our notebook, our paper notebook. And so they'll get the pages, whether it be a map or a graph or a worksheet or whatever information we're adding. And then they can take my notebook, my class notebook that I'm making with them, and they can go back and look at that as a guide to see where do they put those, how much, what kind of information do they put in there, what pages do they put it on, and what do they have to do, what kind of information do they have to add to it. So again, I would really suggest that you do that. Now, this sample is just like I said, it's an old notebook that a student had left. And so it's pretty typical. Here's a table of contents. Here's a rubric for them. Here's that connections and conditions. On the digital copy, they would click and drag these little boxes. Here, they cut them out and glue them. Here's the compass rose. Those were the pieces that were cut out, and they had to label the cardinal and intermediate directions. Just a lot of that same information that we were adding in our digital notebook. So it's the same.
You
Yes.
might want to mention about the sizes between the composition book and the spiral. What we found was a problem.
Yeah, we used spiral notebooks just because they were they're bigger pages. And one of the things that I do now, especially with my digital notebook, but I even had to do last year with a paper notebook, is when I went to print the maps or any of the worksheets in that, you know, I was able to print them off. Maybe if I had to slightly reduce them to like 90% so it would fit around the edges. But when we have students that have composition books, they have to have it significantly smaller. So they sometimes lose the information. So I always have them start with or use a spiral notebook instead of a composition notebook. It just seems to it just seems to be a little bit more user friendly for the kids to be able to add that information in. One last thing that I want to show you real quick is this is digital versus paper. And so here's an example of, it's a map of North America. This is where they, it's the same exact map. So this is without the annotations. This is what it looked like on the Giants website. And so then I printed this off last year, and my student, you know, we went through this lesson. You draw 4 lines and you've got 6 regions in North America, and then you have to label it and add some information, some notes to it. So that's what it looked like in the notebook last year. And this is what it looks like in the digital notebook. And this one caught my eye, this student made, because not only did they do a great job, and I love the color that they were able to add to it. And of course, with the paper copy, you can use colored pencils, but they also were able to add more information here. And I feel like a lot of times for students and even for special ed students, that they tend to maybe because they don't have to go through that process of actually writing everything out, they type it in, and they're very tech savvy when it comes to that, that they can add more detail or more information. And of course, we know that there's also programs like speech to text that will help students and support special ed students as well. So that's just kind of an example of both of them side by side. Let's see, I'm going to get this.
I'm just going to add the one thing we noticed from the first year that we decided to do our notebooks, which becomes their literature guide and our curriculum guide, is at the end of the year, as we've all had, our students are just pitching everything out of their locker, out of their desk, out of their, and both Andrea and I noticed they would go to pitch their notebook and they would hold on to it. We didn't have any notebook thrown away. They all went home. It was like they had put so much effort into those notebooks, they weren't willing to give them up. But they also knew, I mean, one of my students said, I think I'll use this next year too, because they had learned so much about the continents and the world and what to anticipate if they went to another continent or country, that they really, that pride and ownership became huge. And I would assume the digital would be the same. I retired before that happened, so I didn't use a digital notebook, but I think it's important to understand that these become really important to the kids. And like Andrea had said earlier, they didn't lose them.
With digital, they can't unless they
Yeah.
plan on losing their device. I'm going to just show you real quick. This is that world map that they had a list of items that they had to add, names of the continents and oceans and the equator and that. And so when I show this to students, when I did that online in my Google Classroom, Google Meets, I just go through and demonstrate. I show them how to grab the line tool, and we've learned from a previous PowerPoint approximately where the equator is. I encourage them to do things like make the line thicker, maybe change the color so you can see it a little bit better. And so now they've got the equator, because they know that it goes through the mouth of the Amazon, right through that little bulge right there in Africa, and skims over the top of that turtle right there. And so they're able to place that. And then of course, if you need to add text box and label it Asia, and you can make it bigger, different things like that. So it's just really easy for them to add information to it, and they get very good at it.
And the placing of the equator that Andrea was just talking about, that's one of the lessons from Giants.
Yeah, and they pick up on that really quick.
All of our students, we had like a 90% average could place the equator without a problem.
I'm gonna get back to, I think we have like maybe one, there's our final thoughts. So Sharon?
Yeah. So obviously we feel reading gives us someplace to go when we have to stay where we are. This year that quote becomes more and more important. But it allows the kids to really travel to different countries that they've never visited, but they learn about the cultures, they learn how the differences are, but at the same time learn similarities that, as far apart as we are, there is so much similarity from one country to another, from one child to another. Along with that, their notebook becomes their passport of their travels through sixth grade world geography. And because we hit all the continents, they truly have traveled the world.
We have, I'm hoping this presentation link works, but there's our email addresses. I'm going to just leave this up on the screen. We've got about 6 minutes before this is going to turn off on its own. And so I'm just going to kind of leave it open. If you want to ask a question, you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself, I think.
Does anyone have a question about anything that's been presented? Can you put the link in chat?
Oh, let me try that. Okay.
That was a really good suggestion
Oh
also.
like, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to exit full screen. I'm going to go to.
And my apologies for not having a picture, but I am one of the people having a glitch with the conference hookup. So it's
I'm going to
Jeff isn't
stop
there tonight.
sharing and I'm going to go to the chat and let me get, whoops,
I think we're out, Andrea.
did they just kick us out?
Everybody's gone.
You're kidding.
I don't see anyone.
I mean, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay,
Still here.
let me get back to you.
There's 17 of us.
Oh, that's
Oh.
awesome. Okay.
Excellent. I lost all of my video feed to know who's in. So I thought it was just her and I. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I just put that in. That is the presentation that we just did. And hopefully the links work. I mean, they work for me, but I'm like, Sharon and I are authors. So, but we've tried to test it a couple of different ways to see. And so, like I said, if somebody is having difficulty with that, or if I've mixed up something, it says in the waiting room. What did I do here? Okay, let me try it again. To everyone in the meeting. Sorry, I put it to everyone in the waiting room. Rookie mistake.
So everyone in the waiting room's not going to be happy.
I'm glad you're not in the waiting room. I'm glad you're with us. Okay, so again, if you have questions about the books, about the notebook, any of that, how to navigate through it, we're available. Send us an email. And, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something out of it, and it was a good use of your time, because I know time is precious. So
Thank you for joining us tonight.
we'll just stick around here. I don't see any questions in the chat. Do you, Sharon?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We have very nice people saying thank you, though.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you guys for sticking through this with us.
Thank you, Michelle.
Aw, that's sweet. Yeah, so it's been a work in progress with teaching remotely and going through this. And I'm just going to tell you, there's been a lot of things that I've had to figure out. What do they say? Building the plane while you're flying it. And the good
Thanks,
news is
Michelle.
the kids are so understanding, and they're so helpful. So that's been really a blessing for me too. Well, like I said, hopefully it works for you in your classroom, whether you're in person. The other thing I forgot to mention is for the people that are teaching in person and then all of a sudden have to go remotely, this digital notebook works really well, because the kids, even if they worked on it in the classroom, you can continue that process as they're working at home and that.
And the Giants curriculum is set up for both also.
Yes, yes. That's one thing that we spent time on this summer, was making sure everything was digital so people could access it remotely. Oh, that's great. I hope it works for you. Let me know if you need help with anything. And
Yeah.
if you guys have tips or suggestions, please send them to us.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. So we always want to try to figure it out and see if we can build a better mousetrap. Let's see. I think that's
I think
about
we're
it.
within a minute of.
Yeah,
being
and it looks
out.
like some people are starting to exit. That was a great idea, putting it in the chat. I didn't even think about it.
It was. It
Yeah.
was excellent. Unfortunately, we had enough time at the end.
Yeah. Well, I think it worked out really well, Sharon. I'm so glad that you at least had audio, even though we miss your smiling face. But that worked out really well for you to go through that. I just absolutely, I love those books, and I hope this encourages people to, to use that,
I
use
do
them in the
too.
classroom, even if they just use one.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah. The notebooks would be a big advantage. Literature books would be huge. So
And it's
all we
all,
can do.
it all comes down to student engagement, trying to make our students take ownership on their learning and that. So,
Right.
Can I make a recommendation for you?
yes.
When you share your slides, everything after that last /, get rid of that and just put the word copy there. And you will force people to make their own copy of the slides, and
Yes.
it will protect yours.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You've
forgot.
got your settings, your security settings are good. People are going to have a hard time messing up your slides. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
part of that is because we have to do that for the kids.
Yeah.
yeah, your security settings are good, but it would just make things easier for everybody, yourself included.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
Well, Sharon, we got 6:30.
Yeah, I think we need to thank everyone and log out.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, Phil.
I think it was Carol. Carol's the one who sent
Carol
the
was
message.
on?
Yeah.
Oh.